we are going to be jumping around a little bit, but what we're mainly going to read, if you will open your book to the book of Exodus, and if you need to hold 2 pages, you might need to. We're going to be in Exodus 13, verses 17 through 18, and then we are going to pop over to Exodus 16. We're going to read verse 3, and then pop down to verses 11 through 20. I'm going to. Exodus 13, we're going to read 2 verses, 17 and 18. And then we will pop over to Exodus 16. We're going to read verse 3. And then we're going to jump down and read 11 through 20. I know it's a little bit of bouncing around. Just open 13 and open 16. You'll be right there. They should all be on the same page for the most part. I'll give you all a second. I'm going to be reading out of the New Living Translation, so it's going to sound a little simpler than y'all's probably, but hope y'all don't mind that. When y'all have it, say you got it. If you don't, say hold up. All right. We're going to move then. If anybody's still, y'all can rewind the live video if y'all need to catch up, okay? It says in verse 17, it says, when Pharaoh finally let the people go, God did not lead them along the main road that runs through Philistine territory, even though that was the shortest route to the promised land. God said if the people are faced with a battle, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. So God led them in a roundabout way through the wilderness toward the Red Sea. Thus, the Israelites left Egypt like an army ready for battle. And we'll go ahead and pop over to 16. And in verse 3, Israel's talking, okay? It says, if only the Lord had killed us back in Egypt. 3 chapters, y'all. We already done. Apparently God was right when he said they couldn't face the battle. They're not even fighting nobody, and they said, well, he should have just let us die. It says, if only the Lord had killed us back in Egypt. There we sat around pots filled with meat and ate all the bread we wanted. But now you have brought us into this wilderness to starve us all to death. How many know when you're used to toxicity, that becomes your comfort? Right? You hear all the time when people say that, abusive relationships are hard to leave. We're looking at one right now. It was easier being enslaved, and all the times you thought about the food that you didn't think was very good when you were enslaved. Now you're like, well, it was better than nothing. It was like, it was rotted meat, but it was food. I could eat it. I mean, sure, I was throwing up afterwards, but it was okay. So we're going to pop down to verse 11. It says, then the Lord said to Moses, I have heard the Israelites' complaints. Now tell them in the evening you will have meat to eat, and in the morning you will have all the bread you want. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God. And that evening, vast numbers of quail flew in and covered the camp. And the next morning, in the area around the camp was wet with dew. When the dew evaporated, a flaky substance as fine as frost blanketed the ground. The Israelites were puzzled when they saw it, and they said, what is it? They asked each other, they had no idea what it was. And Moses told them, it is the food the Lord has given you. God wasn't caring about any 5-second rules, okay? You got to go and scoop it up off the ground. And you know it's a desert. There's probably getting some sand in there too. So, but God's like, you wanted food, you got food. It says, these are the Lord's instructions. Pay attention, everybody. It says, each household should gather as much as it needs. Pick up 2 quarts. Y'all might have a different word. Mine says 2 quarts for each person in your tent. So the people of Israel did as they were told. Some gathered a lot, some only a little. But when they measured it out, everyone had just enough. Those who gathered a lot had nothing left over, and those who gathered a little had enough. And each family had just what it needed. Then Moses told them, do not keep any of it until morning. But some of them didn't listen, and kept some of it until morning, but by then it was full of maggots and had a terrible smell. Moses was very angry with them. I want to talk to y'all for a very short time, just 3.5 hours today, about my title, Necessary Detours. Necessary Detours. And as I got this word in the middle of the night after reading Luke 24, about reading Jesus coming out of the tomb. I'm not sure how that tied in all the way to Exodus, but that's when I got the title. And as I started thinking about it, it reminded me of mine and Ashley's honeymoon when we started coming back. And some of you will remember it was the middle of September, which we thought was a great month. And it is a great month. But turns out in the middle of September in South Carolina, it's like every major hurricane wants to hit pretty much right around our wedding day, so our anniversary. And so that was one of the worst storms we had. It was Hurricane Florence. You know, the one that flooded Conway so bad you couldn't drive through Conway for months. They had to repair the bridge that had been there for 100 years or whatever, just so you could get back through Conway. Well, me and Ashley had to leave our hotel the day Florence was coming through. So we go to a different hotel, and y'all probably heard me talk about it before. It looked like it was out of a horror movie. And then Ashley didn't sleep, and then when I did sleep, I was talking in my sleep. So by that point, she said, this place is creepy. We're getting out of here. And so the next morning, we drove through Hurricane Florence. 5 hours, 6 hours, pretty much. And, you know, we're driving through, and it was pretty bad in the beginning. There was a lot of rain, a lot of wind. It was okay, don't talk. We're going to pay attention to the road. And then we got through, and then it was probably 3 hours of the brightest sunshine you could ever see. It was all nice until you got into Horry County. Horry County was a much different story. Horry County, we spent 5 hours to go 45 minutes. And we were being led through all these detours, bumper to bumper, trying to get back in. And we're being led through all these detours. And when we finally do get into town, when we finally start to get in, we're looking at the roads and we're like, okay, well, you know, some of the roads are washed out. And then we realized we were driving over roads. And I'm like, if this was an hour later, this road isn't here anymore because the water is washing out. And you're like, okay, this is bad. It's really bad. Especially like when you're 20, you're like, this is really bad. But we didn't see the roads that were already gone. We didn't see the things that the detours prevented us from seeing. Because it's easy to go, this is bad, when you don't know what the other option was. And for Israelites, it's like, we're in this option right now, and we're starving and we're hungry, but we had food back there at least, right? We all had food back there at least. And so we jump into this story. And God is answering Israel's complaints in their time of transition. And it's funny, if you're complaining to God, let me tell you right now, you're in a time of transition. God takes us from glory to glory. And we love that. We love saying that in church. It's like, he is taking me from glory to glory. It's easy to say that during worship. It's harder when you get out the door and you got a flat tire. Because the time of transition, y'all might be learning patience, and you're like, oh my gosh. Come on, Jesus. Come on, let's just speed it up now. Let's speed it up. And so the time in the wilderness is where we don't like to be. It's where you don't like to talk about. It's always, let me ask, any praise reports, and y'all don't tell nothing about the hard part. We're like, Jesus got me to the other side. He got me to the other side of the Jordan. It's like, yeah, he did, but y'all spent 40 years in the wilderness. It's like, I'm glad you got out of it, but we probably could have done it a little faster. But every time Jesus puts us in a point of transition, he puts us in a time frame of transition, there's always something that he wants us to learn. It's always something that he has that we don't fully understand just yet. And y'all don't have to look at it. I'm going to read off verse 4 because I left it out intentionally. It says, "Then the Lord said to Moses," this is right after Israel was complaining, he said, "Look, I'm going to rain down food from heaven for you. Each day, the people can go out, pick up as much as they need, and I'm going to test them to see if they will listen to my instruction." Now, one thing Moses forgot to left out when he told the Israelites is the test part. On purpose, right? You always want to leave some stuff out to see what people do. And so the point was, grab as much as you need. The test was, don't leave any for tomorrow. You got enough for the day. You don't need it for tomorrow. Now, there was one day that they did do that. And that was the day before the Sabbath. They gathered twice as much, so they didn't have to go out tomorrow to do it. And in that moment, God is testing them to listen. Open your ears, Israel. I got you this far. How well are you going to listen to me? And it's like, okay, God, you want us to listen. That's good. That's good. But we never understand the why God is teaching us, why he's teaching what he's teaching us. We never know why it is until we get to the other side. And y'all don't have to read it, but if you want homework, I got plenty of verses. I got plenty of chapters for y'all to read. We're going to bounce around a lot. If you go to Judges 7 and 8, it's a great story. You might as well start at chapter 1, just read all the way through. I'm going to summarize it as best I can. But as some of you know, Joshua is when Israel is out of the wilderness. 40 years later, they finally made it out of that period of transition into the promised land. And they go and they take on this city called Jericho, the city with the best defenses, the biggest wall in the entire land that they are meant to conquer. It is a statement piece win. It's one of those wins that you hear in history class during the war. It's like when they got that win, when they won that battle, that changed the whole tide of it. That's what Jericho was. The guy's like, we're going to start off in a big way. And so they go and they conquer Jericho, and God gives them one instruction. He says, any gold or silver, you're going to bring into my treasury. Everything else, besides Rahab and her family, burn it to the ground. Kill everyone. Take them all out. This is Old Testament God, okay? He's a little bit more feisty than Jesus cools him down a little bit, okay? Jesus is like, all right, so still don't do bad things, but we're going to fix it. But Old Testament God is like, we're going to burn everything. So that's kind of how it works in the Bible a little bit. Same God, but a little bit different personality sometimes. So he goes and they conquer everything. Don't take anything. They leave there, they win, they burn everything down, they go to the next battle. And somebody took some. And you're like, okay, well, they took something. Well, just put it back, burn it down, do whatever you got to do, right? That's what God told you, just fix it. Well, nobody knows he took nothing until they get to the next battle. And they go to conquer this other place, and they go and they stop listening. They turn off their little headset. They're like, all right, I'm going to tune God out for a moment because we just beat Jericho. Everybody else is afraid now. So we're going to go up to this other place. And they look at the soldiers, and they're like, we only need like 3,000 guys for that. We need like 3,000 soldiers. We'll be able to win with 3,000. And they go with 3,000 and get whooped. So bad. And Joshua's like, well, we lost the battle. That's okay. He's just like, oh, we lost the battle. We'll try again. And God's like, somebody took something. That's how God comes in. And he just wakes you up in the middle of the night. Somebody took something. And so they go to find who takes the thing to fix their affliction, because once they stopped listening in Jericho, they stopped listening altogether. And so as Joshua finds a person, he corrects that mistake, God tells him, okay, go fight the same people. But instead of 3,000, I want you to take 30,000. That's how many you're going to need. And they go and they listen to God and they win. I say all that to say this. When you get to the promised land, when you get through your transition, there's a moment where God comes in and he goes, all those things I taught you here were needed over here. There was a reason for the wilderness. There's a reason for the point that you are in your life that I have placed you in. Because you got to learn some things. You got to correct some mistakes. You got to correct some attitudes before you get to where I need to put you. If you can't wait in the grocery line, I can't have you waiting to feed homeless people. I can't have you yelling at homeless people like you get the road rage when you're driving. Okay, we got to fix some things before we get here. And a lot of us, we don't like to fix things. We're really, really stubborn. I'll be the first to say it. We're stubborn. We don't like to fix things. It's hard to fix things. So we end up walking around in our wilderness for 40 years. And the bad thing is we're clueless to it. Israel at least knew. They're like, hey, we messed up. We're going to be here for a little bit. Okay, we're going to be waiting for a while. But we walk around our wilderness going, I wish God would use me. I wish God would use me more. I just wish I could do more for Jesus. Maybe sometime today he will use me. And you do that for 40 years. You are retired before you go, maybe Jesus was telling me to give money to that homeless man I passed every day at work. Maybe it wasn't just about singing in church. Maybe it wasn't just about paying my tithes. Maybe it wasn't just about donating money to people, but actually helping people. Because we can sit in this transition and you watch things dwindle away and dwindle away and dwindle away, and you will never get anywhere further until you get out of it. And I call this necessary detours, but let me tell you something else. There are unnecessary detours as well. Flash forward sometime a few years later from this moment. And Israel doesn't trust that God can get them into the promised land and let them take it over. They've already stopped listening again. And so God says, okay, I'm going to bring up a generation that will listen. I'm going to bring up a generation that does this for 40 years, and they trust that I'm going to provide for them. They trust that I'm going to bring them across in ways that no one else can bring them across. They're going to trust that even though they may be smaller than the giants they have to face, they've got enough stones to bring them down. They're going to trust that God is all they need. And so they walked around and they walked around and they walked around for 40 years until even their leaders stopped listening. Pastors aren't immune to it. Pastors' families, any family, the leader of your family is not immune to it. Yes, they're called to be a leader, but they're also human. We mess up, we make mistakes, we screw up, and we get lost, wandering in the wilderness. And so God, He lets us walk in it. He lets us walk into it till we start listening, till we turn the headset back on and we go, okay, God, I'm ready to listen. I'm done muting you, God. I'm done listening to myself. I'm done doing everything I want to do. I want to do what you want me to do. And so we walk in the wilderness, and we wander, and we wander, and we wander until we realize that the things that we do every single day are what God wants us to do. It's evidence of what God wants us to do. We keep walking and 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 walking. I could do that for 40 years and I'd still be doing it. And they keep doing it until Moses is listening to them complain for what people say in Numbers chapter 20. Again, if you want more homework, there's you another chapter, Numbers chapter 20. In Numbers chapter 20, I had to look at the timeline because if you didn't know this, I found this out today. The first five books in the Bible are not in chronological order. They kind of bounce around a little bit. But Numbers chapter 20 is about 38 years after what we just read. It's only a few pages in my book, but it was 38 years for Moses. And Moses has been listening to these people complain. And I mean, they're at the point they complain so much they're trying to plot to kill him. He's like, man, I could have been in the promised land by now if these people would just listen to me. And God tells him to speak to a rock because they want water, and the water will come out. Okay. Simple enough. And Moses has done this before. But he didn't speak to a rock. He hit a rock. And when he hit the rock the first time, because God told him to hit it, the water came out. So God tells him to do something, and apparently Moses had the volume down on the first part where it said speak. And he turned the volume up, and God's like, the rock. And so Moses is like, well, if the water's going to come out of the rock, I'll just go ahead and hit it. And nothing happened. And then Moses, instead of going, hey, God, did I screw that up? He was like, I'm going to hit it again. And then God let the water come out, and he said, okay, I thought me and you had this down at least. Thought me and you, Moses, we were tight. I thought we had this down. I thought you knew to listen to me. He said, but you can't go in either. Because just as much as all the soldiers need to listen, the leader needs to listen even more. God didn't bring Moses into the promised land because he screwed up on listening one time. He needs someone like Joshua to go, we're not moving until the Ark of the Covenant comes through. We're not crossing the Jordan because God said, wait for that. And the thing is during that time, a lot of people who read in that story, the Jordan was smaller before the Ark was there. Because the Jordan floods. There's water, there's snow and stuff that comes down off the mountains, and it floods. And it was before the time of flood while they were waiting, but it was during the time of flood when the Ark finally came. So there's got to be plenty of people. The Jordan's not a big river that we're looking. I mean, I could swim across that real easy. We could just be right over there. Instead, we're going to wait until things start getting bad. There's a lot of people that would question it. And Joshua's like, no, we're going to sit right here, and we're going to wait till we see it. And then once we see it, we'll go. Because if you can't follow in the first step, God's not going to get you to the last step. If you can't follow the instructions that God is giving us, then we can't go any further. That's the whole point of the wilderness. Because Joshua was there when it started. He was a spy that went into the promised land. He was one of the ones that said, we can do it. And God said, okay, that one. That's going to be your replacement right there. Because Joshua saw the bread every day. He saw the thing that God rained down to provide for their needs each and every day. Yeah, I mean, most of us, if you work or even if you don't, and you come out early in the morning, like I got to wake up at 6 o'clock sometimes. I got to be outside of my house at 6 o'clock in the morning. And you see the frost on the ground. You don't have your car under the carport. You're like, oh, man, I got to go out there and turn the car on so it gets warm and the window defrosts. And imagine that's what they saw every day. They saw something that looked like frost laying on the ground every day that they had to go and pick up and take with them, eat it, make sure they eat it all, and then do that again the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day, for what should have been 11 days, but ended up being 40 years. And while God is very blatant sometimes in our points of transition, while he's very pointed and he's very, I am telling you to do this specifically, there's a lot of times that it's the little things that God does that we don't realize. Because they only screwed up the bread one time. And then they did it right for 40 years. They just kept picking it up and kept picking it up and kept picking it up and kept picking it up. And every morning it was, yawn, stretch, okay, got my bread. Let me fill up my 2 quarts. And that was for one person in the family. Imagine, me and Ashley, that's fine. We got 4 quarts. Okay, we'll just get a gallon milk jug and go ahead and pour that thing in. Imagine, these people, they were farmers, y'all. They got kids. They got animals to feed. They coming out there with a lost my train of thought. What's that thing called with the tire? Wheelbarrow. Yep. They're coming out with a wheelbarrow. Sometimes that ADHD kicks in at the wrong moment. I'm telling y'all. They come out with a wheelbarrow. They got to fill that whole thing up. They're spending probably half the day just picking up little seeds and pouring them in and pouring them in and pouring them in. If you look a little bit farther down in the verses, it says that the manna, boil or bake it. When he's talking about the Sabbath, he said, go ahead and prepare it so you have it ready for the Sabbath. Boil or bake it. Well, most of us probably thought about like, it's probably like little bread shavings or something, pick it up, just pop it in the mouth. But it was more like a seed, more like a grain. So God was teaching them, okay, go out there, spend half your day picking it up. Some of them people that only had 2 people in the house, they were like, oh man, we have so much time. So they go out there and they pick it up and pour it in, pick it up and pour it in. And then they had to take it back and cook it. And then they cooked it and cooked it and cooked it and cooked it. And at night, the birds came in. And it's nice to think, God's dropping fried chicken from heaven, but he ain't dropping fried chicken from heaven. It says the birds flew in. Okay. So you got enslaved people. They got to learn how to make their food and learn that they have to gather it on their own. Okay. And then they have to go and hunt the birds. Enslaved people hunting birds. Well, that makes sense if they're going to be warriors over here. You got to learn how to shoot the arrow in here if you want to be the warrior over here. You got to learn how to take out and provide for what you need if you want to be on your own over here. Because the manna stopped falling when they crossed the Jordan. God said, I provided, but now you're in a place where there is more than enough for you, and I have prepped you from day one. Each and every day, you went out and you picked up the grain and you put it in your bag, and you took it back home and you baked your bread. Well, guess what? When you get there, you're going to go find the grain, you're going to grow it yourself, put it in the bag, cook the bread. And then when the enemies come to take back what they think is theirs, but it's really yours, you have the tools and the weapons to stand against them. Because I have given it to you, and I will give you every battle that comes after this, but you have to know how to do your part. God is a God of action, but God also requires your action to do it. You can't stand aside. You can't just donate money. You can't just give away things and think, well, I'm doing my part as a church. God is also a God of action. Faith and works. We hear in James that faith and works, that I will show you my faith by my works. But a lot of times now, it's just easier to donate the money instead of do the work. Let someone else do it. Let someone else do the outreach. Let someone else be the testimony. Let somebody else do that part. And so we walk around in this wilderness, and we're walking around going, I'm doing my part by giving the money. I'm giving my tithe. I'm paying off my salvation, Jesus. I'm putting it in the plate every day. How many times do I have to do this? And he's like, I want more. I want so much more than your dollar bills. Because you know what Jesus says about dollar bills? You know what Jesus says about taxes? He said, whose face is on it? They said Caesar's. He said, give it to Caesar. Instead, we're sitting here and we're giving Jesus our money and giving him our money, and we're supposed to. We're supposed to give him that 10%, but we don't give him 10% of anything else. What mark is on you? The Savior came and he picked us up and he molded us with his hands. It's the only thing he molded with his hands. It's the only thing that he put together and hand built. Everything else he spoke into existence. But for you and me, he said, let me get the clay. Let me shape them the way I want them to be. And let me breathe my life into them so that way they know whose mark is on them. Okay, so we give the money to Caesar because his mark is on that coin. But who do we give ourselves to? Not just on a Sunday. Not just on a Wednesday night, not just for a couple hours a day, but who do we give it to forever? Because last time I checked, unless you pay a little too much on taxes, they don't give you that money back. And so we keep giving Jesus dollars. We keep giving him these things in the wilderness when he says, if you would just walk, if you would just move, if you would just be where I need you to be, I will bring you to a new place. I will show you new things. I will be able to teach you new things if you just move. Now, I'm saying this not just for y'all. I'm saying it for me too. But we got to stop wandering. We've got to stop transitioning, and we've got to get to where we're supposed to be. And they spent every day preparing and prepping, picking up bread. That's what they called it. They called it bread. Every day. and wasted none of it. Every day and wasted none of it. So every day they came out and they picked up bread. New day, new bread. New day, new bread. New day, new bread. New day, new bread. You might want to call it your daily bread. Give us this day our daily bread. Okay? What's the point of bread? What's the point of daily bread? Why is it always got to be bread, Jesus? I want some croissants maybe one day. Maybe I want some garlic bread. I want some of them Olive Garden breadsticks, Jesus. What about that bread? He said, no. See, this bread falls from heaven, and this bread is what's keeping you alive. And each day you got to gather it to stay alive. It's the bread of life. And in the same way that the Israelites were walking in the wilderness and God was calling them to pick up bread every day, he calls us to pick up the same bread every day. And a lot of us go around this world walking around starving because we don't take the time to pick up Jesus, our daily bread, and make sure we don't waste him for the day. A lot of our daily bread has maggots in it because we've let it sit for too long. We're just like the Israelites sitting there eating rotten food and saying, this is good. I'm sustained. I'm provided for. All these things are great. Without knowing that once we get over here, there's fresh bread. There's a fresh anointing. There's a fresh spirit for us. There's a fresh fire. There's a fresh wind. There's so much freshness over here, but we want to sit in what is rotten and what we spent all these years in and keep walking around it and saying, I'm okay. If this is all I have to do to get to heaven, I'm okay. We treat our bread like the man treated his talent. We go, okay, I've got my bread. I got my bread for church. I had a nice service at church today. Sometimes we don't even get the bread from church, y'all. Some days we come in here and we sit on our phones. We sit absentmindedly thinking about what's for dinner. We sit here, and the next thing you know, the entire preaching's over. And we sit here with our bread, and we get it from church, and then we go and dig a hole and bury it. Say, I don't want nobody else to take my bread. It only lasts for a day. It only lasts for a moment. A lot of us lose our bread the second we walk out the door. We just go, well, that was nice. That's a good piece of bread. You know, do a little crinkle on it like those French people do. Do a little crinkle, like, that's a good piece of bread. Let me just throw it open. And we just walk, we leave it at the door, and we're like, well, that was good. And then we get a little communion piece off of it, and we go, oh, that's good bread. And we don't even realize that we're doing it. I bet God could have got him out of the wilderness before 40 years. I bet you if they were like, hey, we screwed up, and we're going to listen to God now, and they actually listened to God, then God would have said, okay, we can talk. But instead, you know what Israel did? They went right out after God told them they're not going into the promised land. And some of them said, you know, just probably like me, old guilty conscience, when I do something bad, I'm like, let me go try and fix it after I already broke it. Like my greenhouse. Tore to pieces. It was my and Grandpa's greenhouse. It's gone. It didn't even last 3 weeks, y'all. Tore to pieces. And Israel did that to God. Tore God to pieces. He's like, I have done so much already. And instead of trying to build the pieces back, they said, okay, well, we're going to go ahead and go into the promised land. And then God said, no, you're not. I told you you're not going into the promised land. So they're like, well, you know, we didn't listen the first time. We might as well not listen again. See how that works out. And they all died. Just in case y'all were wondering how the story ends, there you go. Skipped right to the end. Spoiler alert. But a lot of times we try to fix whatever we're doing in here by doing more of it. Like, okay, God's asking me to move to help people. I'll give more money. God's asking me to outreach. I'll put more in the offering bin. God's saying, look at all I've given you. Why don't you do something with it? And you're like, okay, yeah, I'll do something with it. God, you gave me a pay raise. So now my 10% is a little bit more. That's how we respond to it. Like we're going to pay off our salvation somehow. It's not earned, it's a gift. hire a substitute, do it for us. That's basically what it is. I mean, Gideon's and everything's great, but God also tells us to do stuff too. God asks us to do just as much. He's like, oh, that's great. I'm glad you're helping them out, but what are you doing? I want to leave y'all with this. If you're stuck in transition today, which I think we're all kind of stuck in our own transition today, let's start by actually listening. I have ADHD, so it's a little hard for me, but I'm getting to the point why it's hard. Actually, give me a look. It's hard for me to write messages or practice piano or anything if I hear something else. So a lot of times, there's been a couple times where Ashley will go and watch TV. I'll step into the office, and I can still hear the TV, kind of. So I put noise-proof headphones on so I can focus in, because that's just how my brain works. But a lot of us do the same thing with Jesus. Like, I'm reading my Bible, but I'm not actually reading my Bible. I can't read my Bible with music going because the music will distract me from what I'm reading. And a lot of us will do it in the middle of our day or something like that, and you're not getting to that quiet place where you can really focus in on it. So let's take, starting today, as a church, as a people, as anyone watching online, and honestly seek where Jesus is leading us. Turn everything out. Tune it all out. Take that time. And it doesn't have to be every day. The gathering the bread wasn't every day. What wasn't an all-day thing. It was, okay, let me get what I need so I can keep moving to where I'm supposed to go. Because they couldn't keep moving without it. They would have starved to death if they were left without it. But instead, they had it so they could keep moving. And they could survive for the 40 years.